We're going to look at 4 different cloud deployment models. And the first one is private cloud. Now, this is not what many people think of cloud as being. And it's easy to interpret some of the characteristics that we looked at earlier in that NIST definition as suggesting that cloud simply cannot be private. Resource pooling, for example. Doesn't that mean you have to pool all your physical resources with different consumers? The thing about a private cloud, though, is that those different consumers can be part of your own organization. So a company may say, for example, we would like to have our own dedicated cloud, and our organization is going to use it, and there's going to be a large number of servers and services that make up this cloud, and will resource pool amongst them. But we're not going to share that same underlying physical infrastructure with other consumers. That is, other consumers outside of the organization. So this gives the consumer of the private cloud some degree of isolation. It's a single organization cloud. Now, this cloud may still be hosted with a cloud provider, so it may not necessarily be on-premise. Alternatively, it may be on-premise. So there are models available where an organization can have their own servers on their own premise, which will then do things like resource pooling and rapid elasticity. So the private cloud deployment model can still take a couple of different shapes. The next deployment model is public cloud. And this is what most people think of as the cloud. So for example, if you go along to Rackspace and you say, I would like a virtual machine in an IaaS sort of model, you're getting public cloud. There'll be other tenants running on that same underlying infrastructure. It'll be resource pooling, and you will be one consumer of that public cloud. The upside to public cloud is it's so easily consumable because you simply go along to the provider and provision the resources you need. The downside is that you're not going to get quite the same level of isolation as in a private cloud. You're going to be running on the same underlying physical infrastructure as other totally unrelated tenants to your organization. And you're going to have other limitations in the way the network is provisioned. As we go through this course, we'll talk about some pros and cons of this model. But certainly, public cloud is what most people think of when they talk about provisioning software into quote-unquote the cloud. Next up is community cloud. And now we're starting to talk about several different organizations, usually unified by the same community, sharing underlying infrastructure. So we're sort of halfway between private and public. Small number of organizations, yet sharing resources with others. That's not quite as common as the other two models. But the fourth model is one which we do increasingly see, and that's the hybrid model. When we talk about hybrid, we're simply talking about a combination of these other models. A really good example of where organizations are increasingly using hybrid cloud is to spread their footprint between both public and private. So for example, they might say, we would like the elasticity and cost effectiveness of using public cloud, and we're going to go and use the public services of an offering such as AWS. But there are certain classes of data or certain types of application which we really want to keep internally. And we're going to put that in our own private cloud. And what cloud providers are increasingly doing is trying to bridge the gap between what's private and very often on-premise with what's public, such that they can create a very frictionless unified experience. In theory, the hybrid model is the best of all worlds. It allows an organization to leverage that elasticity and commoditized pricing model that's so attractive externally with the security and privacy which a lot of organizations still like to see internal. What I hope these models help you understand, though, is that when we say the cloud as though it is a thing, it's not. It's many different things, and it can have many different deployment models. And what we're often doing is using this one term to describe everything from how we stand up very large enterprise systems across multinationals, all the way through to describing how we back up our iPhones. They're very, very different models. They're all cloud, but they've got different purposes And what's important in the context of this course is that they've got very different security profiles. I want to move on and talk about one more way of looking at the cloud, and it's another NIST definition.